A quick PSA before the program. As many of you know, TU has undergone some significant hardships and recent changes. Most notably was the split with Michael Downs and Bryce Nance, leaving to do their own thing. As you hear in this interview, Nick Land spoke with them the same week that he spoke with us. So that's something you can look forward to as well. This was recorded on June 10th, which we think was a day or two before his conversation with Aaron McIntyre. If you watch that interview, there's a bunch of references back to the conversation that he has with us. As for the split, Land generally thinks schism is great. Maybe not so much for us, who have to undergo it, but it's most likely for the best, especially if you believe in historical providence, one of the topics in the following conversation. Lastly, Michael Downs wants to republish Capital vs. Timenergy himself, so he's requested that we unpublish it. Our official statement about that is on screen right now. As of this release, that work will be removed from Amazon in 24 hours. Thanks for understanding. Stay tuned for lots of exciting new releases coming to you soon from Theory Underground Publishing. Now, enjoy the show.
Hello, this is Anne Snellgrove McKerracher.
And I'm David McKerracher. You're listening to What's Right?
And today we are joined by none other than Nick Land. We're so happy to have you back in the Theory Underground world and excited to talk today. How you doing?
Great, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So let's just get straight into it. There's a lot going on with the Trump administration, and on X, you've been very supportive. Now, I want to preface my question about X with a clue to the audience, people who don't know. I'm under the impression, at least, that you take your X posting pretty seriously, and that it's not just some throwaway shitposting thing you do, and that evidence to that fact is that you have just published a book of a decade of your tweets. Is that so? You do take it pretty seriously, right?
Well, it's like, actually, I have had, other than originally posting the content, I've had nothing to do with that. Almost everything. I think this is just my relation to fate, is the fact that other people do all my publishing for me. So it's like almost nothing that is out there. My name was actually put together by me. You know, it's composed initially by me, but other people have taken all the work. So I've been extremely, I guess, lucky like that. I don't know what this particular volume is. I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen it?
No. I'm like 4 or 5 books behind. I mean, I've got this massive publication list, most of which I haven't seen. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll have to catch up at some point.
Right.
Someday you'll have to read your own work.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel about a book of your tweets existing?
I think these things are like, yeah, as I say, fate or whatever. I think trying to imagining what it'd been to try to control that stuff, I just now totally can't imagine it. So I just write it or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So with that preface, then I guess my question is about the Trump administration and your tweets about it of late, starting with when this is a little less related to your actual tweets, the tariffs against China. You live in China. You're very supportive of China. And I haven't seen as much of you talking about that. I've seen a lot more of you talking about Elon Musk and this current breakup between him and Trump. And you've been giving him advice. And I think that's really interesting. But I guess we're just...
when you say... I've been just shouting into the void. Yeah. I mean, I would be absolutely amazed if it has actually been conveying advice to Elon Musk,
Oh,
which
he
would
has.
of course just be like, "What the hell, Elon? What the hell are you doing?" Yeah.
I think you said, what did you say? Adds up to 33, and then in alphanumeric
Oh,
Kabbalah
I
comes out
tried to
as
persuade him. I tried to persuade him that Providence required him to get back in the lane. Yeah.
yeah.
Which he's weaved right out of. But I'm getting the sign that he might be like, his little psychotic break might be coming to an end now. I don't know. I think he just does a few days of just completely losing it. As people say, this is like that whole H1B thing, which, whatever you think of the merits of the case, his handling of that was so bad. It was utterly comical. And I think the same with this. Like, whatever you think of his case, he's just absolutely, he shouldn't be doing this stuff himself. I mean, he should have a guy.
yeah.
And
Right.
Yeah. So with the H1B one, can we refresh my memory? This was about, this was the first time he was disagreeing with not Trump per se, but more like the MAGA movement.
With the MAGA base, and he was just saying, I think he politely suggested that everyone could go and fuck their own face.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
which went down pretty well, actually. I think
this was when him and Vivek Ramaswamy were both saying, like, no, we should be much more pro immigration.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in relation to this Trump-Musk breakup, I guess I'm just curious, like, from your perspective, what did Musk's success, like, what do you think of his role in the administration and this fallout that's going on right
honestly,
now?
like, insofar as it's, excitement about this government on the right, or the part of the right that I'm adjacent to or involved in, is very much, honestly, tied on it being a kind of Trump-Musk meld. And I think everyone knew that was going to be a really difficult relationship. Personally, I thought that they would both realize that it's going to be difficult, and also realize that it was really important, and therefore make an effort to be, very calm and considered and tactical about it. I mean, the last part obviously seems not the case. Like, I mean, I'm a huge Elon Musk fan, but mood control isn't his greatest skill. I mean, I think the thing is, like, he thinks he's better. He thinks he's vastly better at PR than he is. He's actually terrible at PR. And as I say, I mean, he really should get someone to do that stuff for him. I mean, I honestly, this is of course something that is going to be extremely unwelcome and ignored, but he should get someone to edit his ex post, just or at least to say, like, really, this is not a good idea. You should reconsider this. Like, maybe it's as I was sort of just myself slightly making fun of it, but it's like he'll make a joke that is kind of funny. I mean, it's occasionally actually quite funny, and it's like going to just cost him hundreds of millions of dollars. It's an absolutely disastrous thing to say, but kind of amusing. And I sort of think someone should try and persuade him of that, like, so he can get back to getting everyone to Mars or whatever the big picture is.
Right.
I think politics and business has just fallen so much into the spectacle as well. Like, these personalities, this is just how they act now. Trump too, love him or hate him, like, he's got quite the personality that I think rubs a lot of just liberal people the total wrong way. They just say he's an asshole, he speaks out of his ass, and that's so interesting, this shift that we've seen, kind of the
one thing is
professionalism or PR.
Like, if you compare it with the previous administration, where everything was secret, You know, the government just didn't talk to people ever. It was all done through these very occasional, elusive kind of press conferences. The fact that Biden had just melded down into total dysfunction, well, and so therefore no one in the country even knew who the government was, and there was this kind of shield wall to hide that bad. And you go from that, just occult government. People still don't know who was actually ruling the country over those years. I mean, it's a completely unknown fact that needs investigating. You go from that to this government where everything is totally public. It's like you say, it's all spectacle, it's all entertainment. That whole bread and circuses thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the bread side of it is obviously the fact that Trump MAGA, I guess, is not disposed to fiscal austerity. The circus part of it is they actually just do their political process as entertainment drama. It's like The Apprentice. You know, the government just puts itself out there on social media. I guess I don't ever look at the other media. I'm just assuming also it happens there as this just public entertainment spectacle. It's just completely incredible. I don't know whether anything like it's ever happened before.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about what is the vision as from your perspective here on the tech right MAGA alliance. You know, when you were saying that you're saying, if Musk could only focus on the plan, getting us to Mars and whatever else, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what that is, because he does watch this kind of stuff. Musk does watch the internet. What is the vision? Could we remind everybody?
Are we talking about Musk's vision in particular?
Either Musk's vision or the way that he is supposed to play a significant role in the future. Yeah.
I mean, I think that he, people who like what he's done so far just want him to carry on doing that. I mean, it's been just astonishing. And I think people, kind of forget. I mean, since landing on the moon, before, it was basically space activity, meaningful space activity in the United States finished in the early 1970s. And so, we're like literally half a century down the line from doing that stuff. And of course, people get into like a weird space about that, like moon hoaxes and all of this stuff. They just see, like, if we could be on the moon in 1969, why the hell is nothing happening now when we've got vastly superior technology in all dimensions and hasn't happened for 5 decades? And then Musk comes along, and suddenly we're back in science fiction again. We've got rockets being kind of caught out of the sky by giant mechanical robot arms. I mean, it's like, this is so different to what we were seeing before. It's like you've switched channels. It's like you're just in a different narrative. And I think suddenly, Musk has almost single-handedly reignited in everything other than artificial intelligence. Musk has pretty much single-handedly ignited it. But electric vehicles were just like, no one took them seriously, really. They were a niche thing. They were going to be super expensive. It's like maybe eventually they were there, and suddenly now they're everywhere, and Tesla's the most valuable company in the world or something like that. And what he's done with this whatever his kind of satellite-based internet, Starlink or whatever it is just also completely incredible, actually.
Yep, we're on Starlink internet right now out here on the farm.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff he's been doing. So, I mean, so it doesn't require some imaginative leap to say, what do you want Musk to be doing? I mean, it's that stuff.
Just keep doing that stuff, man. Yeah.
It's for sure. And I think lots of people, including, I guess, Elon Musk, thought that if the Democrats had won in the last election, he would be finished. It was a kind of existential thing for him. I've left out the big one. I've left out for Musk is just liberating X. I mean, that was a so farcically totalitarian system. I don't kind of hate whatever his name is. He was there before, but he was completely ineffectual. He just allowed this just blob of censorship and thought mind control and deep state activism to completely strangle that platform to a point that it was just comical. And Musk has completely opened it up. And I think it's right to say whatever, Trump's had some amazing stuff happen to him in that election campaign. And obviously the whole Butler stuff and the photos that came out of that. No one could put that down. He's an incredible political communicator. But I don't think without Musk, without X being a kind of free speech platform again, I don't think there's any way that there would now be the Trump administration in power. And I think it's just like sour grapes for people. There's a lot of people who are really, really pissed off with Elon about all this stuff, who are saying, oh, we didn't need you. I mean, that seems to me completely implausible.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is there's a lot of MAGA people very mad. I think one of your tweets was a retweet of somebody saying there are blue-haired women and red-hatted men now keying my Tesla.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the other, I'm wondering, do you really feel like this timeline is at stake with this potential? Well, with this breakup.
I don't think so. I mean, I've moved into a point of just, almost complete confidence in providential history, and I just think it's like it's not that contingent events like this can throw anything off course. There's just too many just curves that just reached escape velocity, as I think maybe we'll get to later. I mean, the whole AI thing now is just out of the box as far as I'm concerned. I just don't think there's any conceivable way that doesn't just shoot up. So even if the kind of AI 2027 people are a little bit overexcited about it, I mean, I'm not saying they are, but let's just hypothetically say that they're on the extreme end of that. We're definitely only talking a few decades before crazy science fiction type outcomes on that line start happening. And I think any chance of really stopping that is over. And the thing about, I think, this administration, whatever happens, however disappointing it is, and whatever goes wrong and all of that, it's a 4-year slot in which stuff is not going to be stopped. Lots of people are going to be disappointed about what it achieves and all of this kind of thing, but it's not. It was a crucial opportunity. People who wanted to actually seriously stop certain things happening required this time, and they don't have it. And so by 2028, it's going to be just things are going to have escaped so thoroughly that I don't worry they can be recaptured at all.
Right. So this is a 4-year period in which things will not be stopped at bare minimum. Now, there's two directions that what you just said can take us. And one is into the territory of the AOE versus a sort of libertarianism. I want to come back to that because, first of all, you brought up providential history. And I think it's worth dwelling on, because our initial impulse to bring you on was related to the fact that we have been questioning about religion, theology, and God. In fact, I think before we started recording, you had referenced one of our previous episodes on that topic. And so, my impression is that you would rather spend, and this is something you said, I think, within the last few years, you'd rather spend time with a handful of lemurs than most people, if you had to pick who you're going to spend time with in the afterlife. And that's not the answer that most people who believe in providential history would give, right? And so I'm interested in what I've kind of called the CCRU occultism to Catholicism pipeline. We've seen several of the Landian or CCRU-esque sort of educator, influencer type people on the internet over time gravitate into or fully convert into Catholicism. And as I've begun to understand a lot of the precepts of the CCRU, I think I get why. But you yourself, I don't think, have become a Catholic, and so I'm kind of curious. No, you're not. Okay, you don't think that's the vehicle
you're
then?
On safe ground. You're on very safe ground with that one. Yes.
Okay.
No, I've got my John Milton Puritan hat on, or whatever. I mean, for sure. That's the 17th century English Protestantism is definitely where I think things get really interesting.
17th century in particular.
I think the 17th century is where, as far as like what I see as my culture, really reaches takeoff point. And it's because they have a dynamic interrelationship of the new science, absolutely like uncompromising. I mean, we're talking Newton. We're not talking like stuff that's just edging in that direction. And also, this, extreme efflorescence of sort of Protestant religious and theological speculation, and those two things dynamically interacting with each other. And I think it produces this absolutely fertile set of writings that we've never seen since. And when you move into the 18th century, it's all much, the edge is taken off it. It's all much, I would say, like, well, yeah, I don't know whether I can. There's an adjective out there somewhere which I'm hunting for, but I don't think I'm going to find it right this second. But yes, I mean, I think it sort of is lost. The intent. Yeah, but I mean, on your thing, I don't want to drift off this. I mean, the Catholicism thing. I'm trying to be sympathetic. And like the Italian Baroque is something that I've been sort of helping people with research projects recently has brought me into that zone, and it's absolutely fascinating and totally gripping. So it's not that I'm like closed to the fascinations of that. It's just not my path.
Okay. Yeah. And so my sense for what's so special in the minds of the people who are going into it, and I'll kind of riff off of a little James Ellis, a little Justin Murphy, is that it was the CCRU that initially clued them into the fact that you can kind of make a religion out of anything. If you get a group of people together, you develop a sort of esoteric meta language and a shared ritualistic practice for developing means of contact with the outside. And but once they realize that, they go, oh well, this is very niche and university, but there's actually one that's been around for a long time. It's developed insanely sophisticated technologies for doing just this and for working with masses of people. So as far as a vehicle for working with large amounts of people, the Catholic Church is the most sophisticated form of this kind of technology.
Well, I think that you can go from that lots of interesting directions, and I do think they're interesting. I mean, one of them is to say, well, okay, if you're making that move, why Roman Catholicism rather than Eastern Orthodoxy? I mean, aren't you? What is it that what is special? What's the Goldilocks point that leaves you in Rome rather than in Constantinople or in the Orthodox world, which is surely, if anything, more conservative, isn't it? I mean, it's more, if you're saying let's just stick with what we know works, isn't Rome actually the more newfangled of those options at that stage?
Right. Well, and I think that there is a strong tendency also to go into the Eastern Orthodoxy. And my guess is that it's probably closer to, well, what brings you closer to your family, right? Like my grandfather on my mom's side was a Roman Catholic, and so it's like, yeah, that's special. I could see that having an influence if I was like, well, which one am I going to get involved in? Also, which, if you actually go to the local churches and temples, you kind of got to work with what's best in your proximity, I would imagine, if you care about being a part of a real community, right?
Yeah. I know. Well, I think this is all, yes, it's interesting and difficult. I mean, I think, there's the role of the pastoral role, the role of a priest is obviously extremely, the level of responsibility now is absolutely mind-bending. And I think it's hard for people of an extreme Protestant disposition, and by the Protestant there I just mean probably with a tendency to schismatism and probably like individualist tendencies, a kind of, the tendency being like, I'm going to read these books myself, and with whatever help from the Holy Ghost and angelic powers I can invoke or draw upon, find out what is going on here. And if someone else is going to help me, the bar for that is pretty high. You know what I mean? Like, why am I trusting this guy to be my spiritual guide? You know what I mean? I mean, your spiritual guide is likely to be some great historical figure, some philosopher or theologian or writer or poet,
Aquinas or an Augustine.
Yes, what might be Augustine, might be John Milton. It's someone who you think has exceptional insight in this respect, exceptionally high quality communication with this whole realm. And then there's your poor parish priest. Like, who is that guy? Like, I mean, maybe he's amazing, you know what I mean? But it's like, what are the odds, really, And so I suppose there's a particular type of thing where you have a certain dimension of faith, which is to say, I trust that, the higher powers are going to work through this guy and keep him in line, or make him useful to his flock, or make sure that what passes through him is good and true. But I think that's not, if that's how your mind works, then yeah, you are probably inclined in a Catholic direction. But I think that the Protestant inclination is not that. It's to say, I'm going to tap the source. And I think, like, in literature and all of these things, your average Protestant clergyman is kind of a buffoon figure. You know what I mean? It's like there's not the same sense that this is your doorway into the realm of spiritual profundity at all. It's like it's amusing that it's a social organizer of like-minded people. Like, so, your community meets up at the church and he's got this role. But I don't think, this might just be my own cynicism and extravagant individualism, but I don't think that the Protestant tradition is as likely to venerate the priest or pastor as you're going to find elsewhere. So that's what I would say. To people who are on your, as you say, CCRU to Catholicism pipeline, is like, you trust your priest that much? I don't see how you can even trust the Pope. I don't see how you can trust high-level bishops. The fact that you can just trust this guy, leaving aside all the kind of things you can easily reach for in terms of the massive problems of various scandals that have been associated with it, just bracket that stuff off as a cheap hit. But just what is the human quality that you're dealing with?
Yeah, and I wonder how many of, like, the people who go to a Catholic church who are Catholic feel this strong sense of, like, oh, I trust this priest at my local church in the place that I live, versus the priest being just like a figure playing the role in this kind of ritual that gets done in every church. Because we've been exploring and going to different churches in our area. We've gone to a Baptist church. We went to the Unitarian Universalist church that had like 8 old people. We went to the big mega church that had, a big rock concert and the tennis courts. Like, we've been just exploring, partly for anthropological reasons, to just like meet some people, understand community, and explore our own relation to all of these different denominations. But we've found that the Catholic churches have been our favorite experience because of the ritualistic part of it, because it really pulls you out of just like everyday kind of normal speech, normal language. You're not being lectured at. It's like the priest speaks like this and then says something and we all go amen, and it's like I don't care who this guy is. He seems great, he seems friendly, he seems personable, but just the whole, okay, we're standing up, okay, we're sitting down, okay, we're kneeling, okay, we're doing it was just, it pulls you out of everything. So I wonder if that experience is just as powerful to people. And again, we aren't Catholic, we're just exploring, but it is interesting, how many people, like, what role does that priest play, especially when you're like, I'm just going to the church that's down the street from me.
No, I do totally get that. And I think, if I'm just being sort of a bit obstinate about the whole thing, it's like, well, doesn't that really say that the whole Vatican II type movement was just a disastrous mistake, and that what saves Catholic ritual is the fact that it's so programmed, it's so out of the hand of the individual priest, it's so not him giving his sermon or his particular take on the Book of Job or something like that. It's like it's all massively ritualistically programmed by many hundreds of years of tradition. So you can say, look, he's just the agent and executor of this ritual. All we're asking from him is competence at ritualistic transmission. We don't care about his own private spiritual insights or his sermons or his little message for us, homily, or any of that stuff. We just want him to deliver this history to us. But in that case, why, better still, surely, if it was all in Latin, if it was all just like not pretending to be competing with Protestantism, to be talking to you, or talking to you at that level of like, foot in the door. Do you have some 10 minutes to talk about Jesus or whatever?
Right.
That's not the thing. So yeah, I get that for sure.
So then, bringing it back to the idea of sophisticated technologies for making contact with the outside. Obviously, your cup of tea is going to be a lot more a personalistic. You use the term individual approach to you're under the guidance of the Holy Ghost or you let the Spirit move you, and I guess trust is a very interesting problem, especially for me as a natural skeptic, right? As a skeptical 3-year-old, you know what I mean? I've been just, that's my natural predisposition, potentially to a fault. And so, my question was always when people, because I grew up in a Protestant household, and people say that, well, this is what that means. Just even as a little kid, I was kind of like, well, it could also mean this or that. And then the idea was that they had the Holy Spirit guiding their interpretation, and they can also check their concordance and double check the Greek or the Hebrew, and that's what they would do. And I was always kind of like, well, I have the Holy Spirit too. I mean, I've said the words, I've said the prayer, I believe. So if I think it's different, that, you know what I mean? So it's like what it turned out to be was people being like, this is what this means, and me being like, well, is that what it means? Why am I wrong? Just because you're older and you have the Holy Ghost, right? So it feels like the trust issue. The trust issue. I'll just wrap it up with this: is that I totally get, like, who's that guy with the priest, but I also like, who's this guy, or who's my dad, or who's anybody, who's Nick Land with the KJV, right?
This is radicalized hyper-Protestantism. I mean, I totally get this, of course, and but obviously this is on the Protestant vector,
right?
Is to say, why am I trusting any of these people? There's no social institution that I trust to command the interpretation of this stuff. There's the scripture, and there's whatever is going on with you with communication with higher powers, and all social institutions have kind of, at the limit, zero spiritual authority in that respect. And obviously the Protestants, having burnt down their relationship with the church, of course that's true for them in spades. It's hardly like you're going to break with Rome and then say, oh, but I really trust the Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, like, what would be going on there? It's like the vector is absolutely clear, and it goes to dissenting Protestantism. And dissenting Protestantism very often, I mean, arguably tendentially goes to various forms of, like, deeply skeptical agnosticism, atheism, post-Christianity. I mean, of course, I mean, I think atheism is basically a Protestant sect.
Right. Right. Well, it's insofar as you can have a sect that is not, it's like a church of one, while at the same time,
right.
It's like a church of one in relation to a sort of university discourse, right?
Yeah.
Now maybe this would be the good time to bring in Anne's question. Anne's question that we've been asking every guest we've had on this year about God. Obviously, that relates to providential history, right? Now, we would definitely want to get your sense for how you're using that term. But Anne, maybe you can set up the question.
Yeah. So this is a question, like Dave said, we've asked like all of our guests that we've had on in the last couple months as we're kind of doing this anthropology of religion, but also as we're trying to maybe understand our own interpretations and relationship to whatever might be out there and just trying to wrap our heads around it. It, him, them, whatever. Um, and kind of the short version of the question is I grew up wanting so badly to be a Christian, wanting so bad to like have this relationship, to feel the Holy Spirit, to hear God answering my prayers. I never did. That coincided with me learning about in school the Holocaust for the first time. You know, the first time ever being confronted with, oh, like crazy tragedy and evil in this world. And so those two things coinciding, I just kind of like gave up on trying to be Christian, trying to be religious, trying to have a relationship with Jesus. But I think now I find myself and always have like wanting to understand and know, or not even know, but like have some sort of relationship with, again, whatever's going on outside of us, whether it's, you know, some energy or spirituality, or whether it's something more like Lemurian, you know, craziness, or God or Jesus in this literal sense or in a different sense. And so I guess the question that we've been asking, and yeah, I would just love to hear wherever you want to take this, how do you conceive of God or an idea of God or Jesus? You know, what role does spirituality or something bigger than us factor into your life, or how do you conceive of it, conceptualize it? Big question, but yeah, just curious what your
Yeah.
thoughts are.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I would say there's several directions that I think could we could go from here, all of which I think are quite interesting. So, I mean, can I just like list a few things, like bullet
Go for
points,
it,
and
yeah.
then we can just decide which way to go with this?
Yeah.
Because one thing is, when I was thinking, well, what are we going to be talking about on this podcast, and knowing a bit about your guys' interests, but not a huge amount, I thought, well, maybe one topic that would be really interesting is this Japanese current of philosophy. I think it's the only well-known international Japanese current of philosophy that's called the Kyoto School. And it's basically that there's three major philosophers involved in it. And they come out of a Buddhist tradition, but they're much more respectful readers of the Christian tradition than almost any Western philosopher of that time or later. To a degree, often that's a little bit surprising to me. And they have a very strong sense that Nietzsche is also a very big figure for them. Okay. And they have a very strong sense of, you know, the death of God, atheism as it happens in the European tradition, or the collapse, you know, of sort of the large scale collapse, of course not total collapse, of Christendom in the West, as itself being a providential process. You know, that it's like they're saying, you know, it's just like the whole question with Catholicism and Protestantism, that the Catholicism, to my mind, has to say, look, you can't just say Protestantism is a mistake. I mean, you know, it's like this huge thing that happens. If you think there is some sort of divine purpose in history, then what is this? You know what I mean? It absolutely is inadequate to just say, look, it just suddenly people start going wrong or whatever. There's some meaning to it. And the Kyoto School are doing the same thing at a later stage. And they're saying, look, it's not, atheism isn't just some thing that happens when people get lost. It's something that's happening that has this deep historical meaning. and we have to delve into it and actually deepen it. And its problem is its general philosophical superficiality and lack of thought, rather than the fact that it's actually cutting you off in some fundamental way from the deep current of your religious history. It's rather making that religious history into a problem that has to be understood with massive seriousness. So that's one. Sorry, that was a long bullet point, but that's
great.
meant
The
to just be
Kyoto
one
School.
bullet. That's one bullet point.
So the
Sorry,
Kyoto School,
The Kyoto
and you
School.
said they think they're kind of in line with the death of God approach. When you think death of God approach, are you primarily thinking Nietzsche, or are you also thinking sort of John D. Caputo, Peter Rollins, that kind of approach?
Well, I think probably all of those people, but I think probably interesting to you also, they're very, very much in dialogue with Heidegger. And, there's a lot of communication with Heidegger. And so they make you think, well, what is Heidegger really saying about religion? Like, Heidegger was actually training for the priesthood. He was on a Catholic religious vocation. And then he goes somewhere else, He goes somewhere else. And he goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
He's saying, well, there's that. I mean, we can get into the whole Nazi stuff, which is not uninteresting. But
that's not what I was
honestly,
No, but he goes into, I mean, he essentially revives a sort of paganism, right? Or at least a more...
Well, yeah, we can... Yeah, maybe we should have a little circle around this in a minute. I mean, I'm just going to say about him that, his term for metaphysics becomes onto-theology. And it's the problem of thinking that your deep philosophical concerns and interests in the world are resolved by a notion of God. So this is getting, I think, to Anne's point, God conceived as a being. And he says, look, this can't be right. You know what I mean? Like, the question, his whole fundamental architecture of Heidegger's thinking is the ontological difference, that you can't answer the question of being with a being. No, however you try to do that, and he thinks this is the fundamental recurrent mistake of the whole philosophical tradition from its beginning in the West, is to try to solve the question of being with a being. And there's no thing that is adequate to the question of being, and this is a Kyoto School thing too, and therefore being is no thing. Being is nothing, and so when you've got the death of God, when you've got nihilism, when you've got this, like, the last of the Kyoto School guys, his big book is called Religion and Nothingness, and it's trying to reclaim the religious seriousness of the notion of nothingness. I know you've talked about this before in your previous episodes, about that sort of apophatic theology. It's like, it's always what God is not that is actually, taking you out of these idolatrous misconceptions and false leads in matters theological. And so Heidegger gets to this point where it's like, the notion of God is actually an obstacle to the question of being, in which the real religious question surely has to be lodged. This is what the Kyoto School people then follow through on.
I really love that you brought Heidegger into this and related it to the Kyoto School. I just want to double check. There are these interviews of him talking to Zen monks. Is that are those the Kyoto School guys?
I think it's related. I was trying to work out. There's this very famous, one of the things in one of his collections of things is a conversation with a Chinese friend, a Japanese friend, sorry.
Yeah,
Japanese.
yeah.
And I think that at least is in this zone because
Cool.
Some of the Kyoto School people just actually went and studied in Germany. One of them was like, I think Nishitani was his student in Tübingen or whatever, and so there is a real dialogue taking place there.
Well, I have a little announcement. But first I'll preface it with, did you happen to see that I used AI to create an English dub of that classic Lacan lecture, the one from, I don't know where or when, but there was this, with the time he's talking and then that student comes and pours water all over the table and interrupts things. I did the first part of that. I'm working on the second part, but did you see that that's a thing?
No, I'm afraid I haven't seen it.
Okay, so AI has gotten to the point now where that's not too difficult. It still requires more time, energy, and effort than I would like, but of course, it's just going to get better. But I'm in the process right now of I've already created the Heidegger voice in English. I don't think he would like. I don't think he would like it very much, because I don't think he doesn't like English, and I think he refused to speak it. But I have officially trained AI in a Heidegger voice based off of some live lecturing that he did, and now I'm working on. There's a whole. I mean, I have 100 of his lectures and seminars that he gave queued up, and my goal is just to start rolling those out over the next few years because I love them and I love listening more than anything, and so it's one of the coolest things that I've found that AI can do for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I will tend to them with great pleasure, I'm sure. Yeah, let me know when they're rolling out.
Awesome.
Okay, so you said that you were going to roll out a bullet point list, and I think you started with the Kyoto School.
Yeah. Now I have to try and remember what some of the other bullet points were.
Yeah.
The second bullet point was, so what's the language that is your anchor in the tradition? And for me, it's the invisible hands. And I pluralize that. That's problematic. Obviously, Adam Smith's thing is not pluralized. That's weird in itself. Like the hand of God, what's going on there? Like why isn't it not pluralized? So I think it's important it's pluralized. And I think this is like moves you in all directions. It sort of is anchored you in the religious tradition. It is the key to the understanding of what liberalism ultimately is in our political culture. It's what is of great interest to me is like decimal numeracy, your two hands. Someone said the other day, like, left and right, isn't that like basically ultimately before it's the kind of pre-French Revolutionary National Assembly, isn't left and right just your hands? Is that Kant's incongruous counterparts? It's a totally fascinating question in philosophy because of that. Like, what's going on with your two hands? They're symmetrical. They can't be actually substituted for each other. And that non-substitutability is like actually guarantees the autonomy of space. It's not reducible because of that. So again, like back to sort of the Anne question, it's like that's where I'm anchored. I think I'm reluctant. I don't use the word God very often because I think if I did use it, it would be, I could use it in a way that I think has been used traditionally, but that is a usage that I find a little bit, I'm not sure I'm going to say hypocritical, but it's like, it's used with such vagueness and such lack of determinacy that it's kind of, in a way, more of a gesture towards social compliance than it is actually a statement of sincere principle.
Okay.
But the invisible hands I'm very, very comfortable with, in the sense that I think, I think that our history has a hugely important, irreducible religious dimension to it, in which all the actual facts of religious history are related, and is essential to our political tradition, and is essential even to our scientific tradition. Like Walter Russell Mead is someone I think is extremely good and powerful on this question, and says, like, Newtonianism, then Darwinism, the cause of the kind of scientific worldview are both also developments of the notion of the invisible hands. Like Newton, who's absolutely, like, is a scriptural fundamentalist. He's spending much more of his time trying to understand the specifications and secrets of the Temple of Solomon than he is of actually doing celestial mechanics. Obviously thinks, the order of the universe as described by the Principia is actually held in the invisible hands of divinity. And the same with, Darwinism too, is in its origin comes out of this particular religious tradition that, if I can just, I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but just at this point, just to say, if you just take it back to Adam Smith, why is he talking about the invisible hand? It's that every individual can just selfishly pursue their own best interests without any notion of a kind of larger social goals. If they do it rationally and in a civilized fashion, there's no sense of collective purpose, and yet collective purpose arises through the invisible hand. And this is Darwin's view too. Like every animal, every creature is just trying to survive, produce prey on what it needs to live, and yet the whole ecological cathedral of life on this planet emerges through the invisible hands without any of the parts of that system in any way being deliberately involved in that at all. So liberal society and biological ecology have exactly the same theological principle, and that is the same principle as Newton's theology. It's the same principle, I think, of sort of 18th century Protestant religious sensibility. The notion of providence is that. So that's my second bullet point.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. What's the third bullet point?
Actually, I'm not sure I quite got. I just assumed there'd be a third bullet point, but it's not accessible right at this moment. So I think we're just on 2 bullet points right now.
That's great. Dave.
Hate to interrupt this amazing conversation, but we would be remiss to not share an advertisement from our sponsors. And we're not sponsored by any corporate or state entities other than ourselves. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the past courses and the ongoing courses here at TU. Because if any of them sound exciting to you, well, you can access all of them by becoming a subscriber. That's right, subscribers make all of this possible. Subscribers get access to the course I taught on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, as well as the course that I taught the first half of last year, Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, the second half for which I will be teaching this winter. I've also taught critical media theory and critical doxology and Timenergy with my wife, Ann Snellgrove McKerracher, who is the co-host on What's Right, so you should already be a little familiar with her. Also, you would get access to the course I taught at the university, 3 semesters worth, on Intro to Critical Social Theory and Socioanalysis. But also, we've had lots of other great professors teach Introduction to Marxism by Chris Catrone, Intro to Lacan via Seminar 11 with Todd McGowan, Introduction to Ivan Illich with Brian Weeks, The Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis and Autism with Dr. Leon Brenner, the Michael Downs Seminar, Introduction to Slavoj Žižek, Introduction to Nick Land, and Žižek's For They Know Not What They Do, all taught by Michael Downs, as well as What is Sex? That was a collab that I did with Cadell Last. Theory 101, a collab I did with Hello Gorgias. And then also, of course, there's Carl Jaspers' is The Idea of the University, PMC Consciousness and Ideology. These were early, very important courses that I taught with friends at TU back in 2023. And they remain important to this day. Every one of these courses comes out of an overarching research project. There's a real driving force, mission, and agenda to the research going on at TU because we want to understand the situation for the sake of large-scale structural change focused on the good life. What does that actually mean? Well, you'll get a little taste of it in today's interview with Nick Land, but also, if you really want to go deep, obviously, these courses are something you could spend the better part of a year binging while at work. Ongoing courses that come out on a monthly basis are the Fundamental Problems and Core Concepts at TU with yours truly, also my seminar, Philosophy of Nature with Nina Power, the Benjamin Studebaker seminar, as well as his course, The 12 Political Theorists. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the line. The only way to make this all possible and really deepen your knowledge and familiarity with all of these different things is to become a subscriber today at http://theoryunderground.com/subscribe. Thank you. Oh, I was muted. I was muted. Okay.
Yeah.
I said so many things. So the 3-0 conception of God, then, is that something that you do not agree with or think not useful? The 3-0 being, all-knowing, ever-present, and all-powerful.
Omniscient, omnibenevolent. Sorry, what's the third one?
I think omnibenevolent gets presented as a fourth one. The 3 are omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence.
Omnipresence, right?
All-powerful, all-present, all-knowing.
Very interesting. They're all very interesting. But I think, honestly, I'm a little bit reluctant to accept that unity is a principle that escapes, as Benjamin was saying, to use his language, this apophatic criticism. Like, we will say about all of these other elements, characteristics of God, that ultimately the negation of that is necessary to hold to an infinite and eternal model rather than one that is just kind of finite and idolatrous. I don't think, well, why does unity escape that? Why are we confident that unity goes all the way to the top when these other characteristics are subject to apophatic critique?
Right.
So I'm not happy with that assumption at all. I mean, I think it's extremely interesting, but I don't find it compelling.
So I think that this idea gets really taken up. I mean, first of all, the 3-0 idea kind of gets codified or whatever by Aquinas, but it does get taken up by the Protestants and have a huge influence on Protestantism. And I understand you're talking about even atheism having a very important historical role in the development of our relation to the outside and our means for communication with the outside. It's got a role to play.
And it's a religious phenomenon. It's
And
a critical religious phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
I mean, that's the Kyoto School point, fundamentally. If it could only be serious, it would be fully religious.
right.
Based on this principle that being is no thing. So
Right.
if you're an atheist and your commitment ultimately is that the highest cosmic and religious principle is nothingness, there is no God, well, get serious about what you mean by that nothingness. Because they say, well, that nothingness probably is actually what the mystical religious tradition has actually meant by God.
Mm-hmm.
If only try to think it through properly. Like, it's like, well, it tends to be so half-assed, atheism. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we don't believe in that God. So what do you believe in? Oh, nothing. Well, what do you mean by nothing? Oh,
Right.
that goes beyond our brief. I mean, we don't have to think about that. We're too busy redditing about the mistakes of the dominant religious traditions to
Right.
actually think that through. And that's like why that's the Heidegger reference, that's the Kyoto School reference. It's like, be serious about what you're saying about reality.
Yeah, this is like the Lawrence Krauss point. Remember, with the New Atheists, he was the physicist guy who was like, no, actually, physics does answer how something can come from nothing. And it's like, actually, bro, philosophers have been thinking about that, and they've been thinking about it a lot deeper than you have, And there's also theologians who have been thinking about that, largely due to Heidegger's influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I wanna take that though, the 3-0 point, and you're saying, well, unity. Why would we not apply the apophatic approach to unity? And I guess the reason I brought up atheism and Protestantism here is because I'm thinking, well, what does it mean to take any one of these traditions seriously? What does it mean to say that there's a genuine innovation, function, role in any one of these historical movements, or to privilege one over another? And so when I'm asking this about Protestantism, there's certain things that almost all Protestants seem to agree on, and the 3-0 being one of them, and then the Trinity being another, and then now recently it's become very important for me to think about that Trinity. Is it a genuine innovation and a necessary sort of technology, we could say, this Trinity idea, in particular the idea that we humans need some kind of a mediator in order to have an open channel to the outside? That, we talk about the Holy Spirit being a sort of conduit, but we can also talk about, well, you actually need Jesus because we're fallen, and we need, there has to be some kind of a bridge, and it's only through Jesus kind of signing off on you that you're able to get that.
Right.
And so I think that that's so important for Protestantism. And so if that's, I want to check with your brand, is that not important for your approach?
I mean, look, the Bible is just absolutely chock full of people talking to angels. And it's like, okay, maybe that falls off a little bit with the New Testament. But I mean, I mean, I guess partly we're in this. It's a complicated thing because we're swirling around this whole Catholic Protestantism thing. I mean, I think the Catholics still have it for sure. That the angels are everywhere. You go into one of these amazing cathedrals that in this kind of the more secularized world, they're like just art galleries and cultural centers. It's like they've done that really well. I'm saying that not as someone who's celebrating the lack of religious function that hasn't completely disappeared, but just that they've not been erased, or they've not been desecrated, or you know what I mean? That they've been kept. Their seriousness and the reverential attitude to them has been preserved through the aesthetic, even when it's been lost in other ways. So there's a slight digression, except to say that they're just teeming with angels. And I don't think that it doesn't. I think there's in certain strands, dominant strands, popular strands of Protestantism, it is probably true that there's a great fear that angelic beings are not to be trusted. Like it's not, if you stick with Jesus, because if you just promiscuously kind of engaging with angels generally, then how do you know what side they're on, or whether they, what their agendas are, or all of this kind of thing? It's like a certain kind of trustlessness. And I don't share that sensibility at all. I mean, it seems to me like if something is kind of, malignant or malevolent, like impersonating Jesus, is that really not something it could do? If it can pretend to be an angel that's on your side, couldn't it impersonate anything? I mean, so I don't really see what the security is there. And I guess it's the case that in some sort of ecclesiastical church traditions locally, it's not very healthy to actually directly try and engage with celestial beings of any kind, and you should actually relay everything through the church authorities. I mean, probably the Catholics also have a lot of that. You know what I mean? I think they probably think mystics are a little bit suspect. They can't rule it out, but it's probably considered a little bit problematic. So I don't know whether I've wandered off this, but I'm definitely into encouraging maximum communication with celestial beings of whatever kind. I even don't think. I think you should try not to be very suspicious, and I have seen The Exorcist, but I just think it's like, well, I don't know. What do I think? I'm probably have a certain, if someone said, look, you're being completely reckless, why do you think you're not inviting demonic aggression of some completely horrific kind? I don't know what I'd say about that.
Okay.
I'd say I have faith. I trust the plan. If I had my MAGA hat on, your holy guardian angel will take care of you. I don't know. I haven't singled. I haven't homed in on a particular answer to that. But my inclination is definitely not to be paranoid about it. I think enjoying your religious tradition is a lot easier if you just, not in that mode that you're just on the verge of horrific demonic assault. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for going there with us. It's just been really interesting to hear the perspective, like, to this big question from, we talked to Peter Rollins, we've talked to some other people who lean more conservative, and people who lean more liberal. So yeah. Dave.
Well,
where do I fit on the conservative to liberal spectrum on this, would you say?
On that one?
I would say that you're liberal but right wing. I wouldn't say you're conservative, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I right? Yeah. Would you go with that? Yeah.
I would be happy with that for sure. I
Okay.
even delighted.
Nice.
Okay. So, before we get, maybe we should just get into this question, but no, no, no. Before we get into the AOE versus libertarianism one, I gotta one quick little follow up on the whole Protestantism thing, and it's basically if you see atheism as an important historical sort of part of our history, what about progressivism? What about universal Unitarian kind of approaches? What about the coexist people? What about the we're all the same and nationalities should all be abolished? Like, what about why is that not an important part of our story as well?
No, I think I mean, it's not easy for me to say, but I would say for sure it has to be, of course. You can't ask the question without seeing that that's true. I mean, and one of my sort of like, just deep dives into the 17th century, how much of that stuff is already happening there. It's really deep. It's obviously, like lots of people have said, I mean, Peter Thiel very articulately has said this, among many, many, many people. It's like, I think he described it as the great Christian temptation. And it's extremely integral. The notion that you could have some adherence to our actual religious tradition, of course, there's people who hate it and say, if only we'd remain pagans or whatever it is. But, it's fate, if you're going to put it in pagan terms, it's providence, if you're going to put it in our religious terms. That's what's happened. And all of these ideas, the left, is completely integral to them. It had to be there. It would be absolutely self-deluding to pretend that wasn't the case.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But you see it as a temptation, though.
I obviously see it as something that is like catastrophically erroneous. I mean, I think it like leads to terrible things, has led to terrible things. And like Anglophone political history, I think since the end of the 19th century has just gone into calamitous error in these kind of areas now. But those calamitous errors were just absolutely had to happen. I mean, they're part of our culture, they're part of our tradition, they're part of our history. So just to think that maybe, like I'm saying about the Catholics and Protestants, you can't just say, oh, if only this hadn't happened. You can say that if you like, but it's like the most useless thing anyone could ever say about anything. So that's like, get over that and then say something interesting about it.
So you see what's going on in LA right now as this catastrophic result of a door that does get opened by Christianity, and it's a door that we need to just kind of be realists about, accept that it's happened, and nonetheless proceed to do what we can to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with that as a story. I mean, obviously we have to understand that the fact we've got to where we are now makes perfect sense. Like we understand why this all happened. Obviously, like if I'm going to just like regress a little bit in terms of political theorizing to the kind of NRX period, which I think I'm not trying to diss any of that stuff, but I do think we're kind of post it for important reasons.
We're post NRX, post neo-reactionary.
Yeah, reactionary, yeah. And it's like, I think the attempt that it made to resolve the issues that you're raising was deeply Protestant. It was secessionism. It was to say, look, the Protestant tradition, the whole Christian tradition, but the Protestant tradition, perhaps I'm open to this even more intensely, is open to these disastrous errors. And its solution to that, it's the Protestantism's own inherent solution to that is schism. So it's like, if you think that like your religious community is just going wrong, you split and you take, your own improved version of that to the frontier, actually, if we're talking historically, to the frontier and start over again. That was the mechanism. And obviously we've lost that. The frontier closed in the 1890s. You can't just leave. It's like the whole neo-reactionary problematic is really, you can't leave anymore. So what are we going to do? And then we have MAGA, which is, I think, a huge thing. And, just at the most superficial level, it's huge because Trump is actually a political genius. And, you hate him or love him or whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's like, he's completely turned things around. And he's made populism go right for the first time since like probably the 1920s or something like that. And so no one's going to be doing any splitting anytime soon. It's like, where do you split? I'm open to all that stuff. Splitting to me is still the greatest thing that can happen, but it's just like, looks to me like off the table. So, all this California thing. I mean, the old sort of NRX whirling thing is like, just like, shed California, so do this whole complicated US, Canada complex, whatever, by just peeling off BC and California and making them into a new, like, Pacific liberal hyperstate. That's NRX thinking. None of that's going to happen. Obviously, I mean, I guess that's not controversial.
I think I got interviewed by a guy who's a part of that. So did Benjamin. We got he's all about that Cal exit, kind of like new state approach. And now I want to get back to I want to take this theme of splitting and the fact that you're not against splitting and turn it into my big question that I think everybody's wondering about after the last time we had you on, related to the AOE. But first of all, hold on one sec.
And we were talking about like the mystery and kind of the negation of, like, that's kind of his approach, is God as, right, Dave? Like, God as this ultimate mystery, and so going to an experience like a Catholic Mass is like this alienating, mysterious, kind of pulls you out of everything and is a jarring experience. And it was, interesting. So I tend to like that experience more.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And do you think, if you now sort of set up a dialogue between you now and your childhood you, who was like feeling alienated and dissatisfied and, like being expected to make some kind of belief commitment that you just felt was impossible, how does that dialogue go now?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Can I hit record? I want to get that.
Yeah, if we want to do that.
Recording in progress.
All right, we're back, and Nick had just asked Anne a question, so
Yeah, maybe if you want to repeat the question for us, and then I can give it a shot.
Yeah, I was just saying, I mean, out of context, it might not make so much sense because you were just talking about your experience of the Catholic liturgy and
Mm-hmm.
this sense of kind of ultimate mystery as what is the gripping heart of that. And so I was asking you if you could set up a dialogue now between the you now having that recognition and the you as a child, um, being asked in your opinion then to make a kind of religious commitment that you were not comfortable making, or you felt somehow you couldn't make with integrity or
Right.
sincerity. How does that go?
Yeah. And I don't know, talking to a 13-year-old from this perspective, just having more of a theoretical, philosophical background, like obviously there's going to be that just intellectual barrier, but I think the like reassuring the embracing of the unknown, and that even though there's people around you who seem like they have this answer, who seem like, oh, they just know this fact because they've felt it, they've heard it, whatever, um, don't take them too seriously. I think I was
Right.
just, you're like a 13-year-old girl, you're wanting to look up to these figures, you want to be
Yeah,
like
yeah.
them. It's a typical, kind of, I think, teenage experience of seeing these role models and going, I want to be like them. Oh, well, they hear God, they have this great relationship with Jesus, and it's like you can, admire them and take certain aspects from them, but you don't have to take their belief system so seriously. You can find your own interpretations. And yeah, I just think the mysterious, open, negative part of it all is intriguing, and allowing that to exist, not needing an answer, which I think is so
Right.
interesting about the Baptist leanings or these evangelical leanings, that it's just like, I'm the priest, I'm just going to tell you this is the interpretation of the Bible. You all just need to point blank believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins. He was resurrected 3 days later, and if you just accept that and believe that it is true, then you're saved and you will go to heaven. And I just find that, like, you don't have to think about it. You just turn off your brain and accept this truth is very interesting, as an interesting
Yeah,
tendency. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, it's obviously there's an amazingly interesting historical paradox in this, is that this this figure of the Protestant preacher has taken on this role as the dogmatist. I mean, it's like obviously the Protestant Reformation happened because of the fact that there's a whole bunch of people saying, hang on, you know, the church is like corrupt and dogmatic, and it's supposed to open this space to kind of like encounter scripture, like, get in contact with the Holy Spirit, trust yourself to make sense of this stuff. And it seems to have gone like 180 degrees around now, where the kind of controlled theology is like coded Protestant, um, which is quite interesting, I think. And
Right.
the
Yeah.
Catholic side is like, well, it's a mystery, like just like throw yourself into the mystery. We're
Hmm.
not like telling you what to think. I mean, ideally, it's not even in a language you understand.
Right.
Um, it all seems to have turned around quite weirdly.
Hmm.
Yeah, when we
Yeah.
take that back to what we can say we know of Jesus, or what seems to be a common thread between the different accounts in the gospels, he was definitely not into the legalists. He didn't like them. The people who were super like, this is what it is. You know, he was like, what, why are you doing this? And they're like, why are your disciples picking corn to eat on the Sabbath? And he was like,
Right.
didn't David and his soldiers like go into the temple and eat like the sacred meat they weren't supposed to. Come on, guys, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So on this, maybe let's get into this big question then about the AOE, and so maybe we could start with, you know, we're talking about the architectonic order of the eschaton versus the neo-Lemurian time sorcerers, two different forces at work. And you know, in sort of Jordan Petersonian terms, this is like we're talking about order versus chaos, right? Is there anything you would want to add to that before we go deeper into it?
Well, I mean, there's so much
Yeah.
that it's hard to even know where to begin on this. Like, let me just say, like, what you've just said is, I think, not at all a bad representation of 1990s CCRU basic framing of this question. This time, I think it's so. I'm not saying in any way you've got this wrong like that. I think, you know, the CCRU, 1990 CCRU is like punk Lemurian, fuck you dad to the AOE. That's basically like what's going on there. But I mean, I've become a lot more sympathetic to the AOE. I mean,
Right.
I wish they'd actually run my education. You know, I suspect I would still be a kind of dissident, but I think if they had actually educated me, I would really like where I would be right now, you know, sitting on a pile of classical languages, just really solid, kind of a really solid involvement in the tradition. And whereas getting to the tradition has been a long, circuitous, complicated, weird route for me. You know what I mean? I don't think it would have been nice to just have that rather than having to find my way to it so indirectly.
That'd be a much more classical, great books, canon kind of education. Right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, and the whole of our culture, I think, is typical. I mean, I just think the city are just, it's an extreme case extrapolation of our whole culture, which is like, you know, you have the tradition, there are dissent to the tradition that's allowed by the tradition. I mean, the tradition permits and encourages that dissent, and the dissent totally takes over so that you just actually forget the tradition and all you've got is the dissent, sort of howling at some sort of straw man, ridiculous kind of caricature of what it is that is the man, dad, you know, these just like fake models of authoritarian suppression, like, so
would you say that would you say that your younger Deleuzian self was railing against a sort of straw man or caricature of the man?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, there's a certain kind of retrospective kind of apologetic that I think is not helpful, but I think for sure that is a very common syndrome. I think that sort of like, just like, you know, untethered rage against some sense of that you've been screwed over by history and you don't know why, you don't really know what it is you're angry about. I mean, that's extremely common. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if I was doing a time travel thing, I would just try to say, look, you can still end up attacking this stuff, but try to at least understand what it is you're attacking. I mean, it's like, it's where you've come from, and your opportunity to attack it has come from it too. I mean, this is the other side of our whole conversation about, is the left just a mistake? I mean, all of our avenues for dissent obviously come from the tradition. It's not like there's some other magical source of dissent that just comes out of the ether. I mean, it's like our tradition allows that. So understand where it's coming from in that sense too. So this is, I mean, if you're going to make a grandiose version, this is the tragedy of liberalism. Obviously, it's just ended up like lost, confused, shouting at dad, doesn't know what it is, has totally fucked up, and has ended up being just, supplanted by other stuff that just like says, hey, I'll kill the man for you, you get out of the way, you're a nerd anyway. And so like, it's really, I mean, it's my only commitment is to liberalism, but I think liberalism has been such a complete disaster in some ways. It's such a failure. It's so pathetic what's happened to it. It's tragic. And if it wasn't that history was providential, we would just be screwed without a question.
But thankfully, at least according to your account, it is, right? So because it's providential, you kind of have it's messed up, but it's going to work out attitude.
I think so.
Okay.
I do think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that in the part one of you being here at TU, you had talked about being more sympathetic to the AOE, and I don't remember if you'd used the word sympathetic or if you had kind of actually said it like you're on the side of the AOE now. But my impression, my impression, which could have been mistaken, was more like, no, you're down with the AOE now. You're not down with the Neo-Lemurian time sorcerers.
I can't go along with that because technically speaking, the numogram is a Lemurian document or a Lemurian map. Like all its principles of construction are Lemurian. So it's just not, and for me, that's like my highest intellectual authority. So it just doesn't make any sense for me to deny that. And because we went this weird way as the CCA, there's not a very satisfactory what would be great would be to have an Atlantean occult model of the world that was very coherent, from which one could then extract as its kind of suppressed sub-basement this Lemurian understructure. But that's obviously not the way that it happened. I mean, how it happened is that the numogram was dropped in our labs, and we then tried to do a narrative superstructure thing where we deliberately did some kind of crudified, confused Atlantean superstructure to it that, never fully cohered. I mean, like, the Atlantean version of the numogram is something we call the Atlantean cross. The Atlantean cross, I have hopes for as being something potentially interesting, but it should have come first, and the numogram be extracted from it. There's not a trustworthy, coherent, canonical version of the Atlantean cross that exists. That's something that still has to happen. There's a version of the Atlantean cross in our CCRU volume. I don't trust it at all, and it's simply impossible to distrust the numogram in that way. So right. The Atlantean tradition has not been well treated by the CCRU. That's for sure true.
What makes one trustworthy as opposed to the other? What makes one you're like, oh yeah, this works, whereas you're like the other one you're like, no, I'm not really so sure?
It's just to do with like being ultimately arithmetically coherent, deeply, rigorously, arithmetically coherent. So I don't think anyone can. I've certainly never come across anyone who's said. I've seen different versions of the numogram, but no one can say, "Hey, that you should change it a little bit. Like this number should be over here, or this should be a bit different." It just doesn't. It's so perfectly, seamlessly, arithmetically coherent that it's impossible to do that. The Atlantean cross is the version that we've got. You could shuffle all kinds of stuff around. Should this number really be here or not here? Or it's like it's not compelling at all. There's nothing that's coming out of the math, that's coming out of the numeracy that is forcing you to take that as being authoritative. Yeah.
Now, Anne, I know a lot of this is a lot more new to you, and so I kind of want to just give you an opportunity to ask any sort of clarifying question you might have about any of it.
I don't even know if I have a question, because it is kind of new and foreign to me, and just in terms of theory, philosophy, this is not an area that I tend to read or really explore right now,
Yeah, no, it's very opaque. It's very esoteric. I mean, actually, with the old TU people, I did a big numogram dump.
Okay.
So if you're interested, I mean, that will be appearing at a certain point, and it's like, it takes, we tested it in that, and it takes like 3 hours to do an elementary numogram dump, and then after 3 hours, I think it's good. Like it's all there, enough, But we're not going to do it in 5 minutes. So
right, yeah, okay.
I think it's a kick up the road thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was in the editing and proofing of the Capital versus Time Energy book that Anne was, I think, first really exposed to a lot of this stuff. But so I guess then I on the Atlantean cross and it coming out of the numogram, this kind of relates to a question I had about your work, and you were talking about being pretty stuck on it. Are you still feeling that way? Or
stuck on what? I can't remember what I was stuck on.
You're working on a book.
Oh yeah, no, I'm feeling fine. I'm not writing a lot, but I know what it is that I'm writing, and it's like, yeah, no, I'm feeling fine.
Cool. Then now the numogram and numerology and how it relates to all of this stuff, I guess, brings us back to this sort of your Protestantism is, you have your own very particular approach to reading the Bible, and I think we've talked a little bit about KJV onlyism, which is to say, the King James version is the version, and I'm wondering, does that relate directly to the numerology approach that you use, and is, what's going on there?
Yes, I think for 100% that's true. Like, okay, because the crucial example actually doesn't come from the KJV, but we can take it back to the KJV. So the question is, like, what do you even mean by inspired scripture? What kind of test would you do, or what on earth would lead you to that notion that there was such a thing? And overwhelmingly the most powerful example of this, and again, I talked to your other side about this, but I think it bears repeating because I think it's like very, very crucial. So the CCIU's Kabbalistic cipher is called alphanumeric or anglossic Kabbalah, AQ. And all these ciphers, there's a big, I'm very encouraged by the amount of Kabbalistic culture that is happening. And it's especially, I'm very grateful to this particular band of guys. I don't know much about them. I just know them through their website. That's called Ciphers News. Spelt with a Y. I think everyone should always have this up in their tabs, frankly. And it's like, it's a basis of a kind of form of discussion, not only between people, but between all intelligent forces in the universe, basically, kind of.
Did you say it's cipher.news?
It's ciphers, CYPHERS .NEWS.
Okay.
Utterly crucial website.
Yeah, because there's one that is cipher.news and there's one that is ciphers.news.
I think it's with an S.
Okay.
I think it's with an S.
Got it.
If you open it up and then click on ciphers, you should get some like.
It's like the Matrix.
You see, should.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, we got it.
Okay, and you can see there's lots of interesting ciphers. Again, to just repeat stuff I've said elsewhere, like I used to be very dogmatically supportive of alphanumeric Kabbalah. I think there's a lot now, and my position on this is that any potential channel of communication is an actual channel of communication. So I think if you could have communication through this channel, it's happening. If you want it to, just trust it. Like you just feel whatever you like to do, because there's a lot more intelligence out there than there is in here. So if you can deal with it, they can deal with it. So we've got alphanumeric Kabbalah, and to try and race through this very fast, like if you do sentences, phrases that add up to 666, the number of the beast, that's the 36th triangle. It's a really important number. Obviously, we know it biblically from the Book of Revelation. People are a bit freaked out about it, but it's a very important number, and it's like interesting. And sentences, phrases, whatever, lines, poetic lines, adding to that value, tend disproportionately to comply with the basic metric scheme of English epic verse, which is iambic pentameter. So if you have a line in iambic pentameter in English, it's likely to be close to 666 in alphanumeric Kabbalah and AQ. So I was having a chat with people on X and saying, look, pushing this idea, call it beast pulse. It's this thing that actually the esoteric, the occult, basic kind of rhythm, underlying rhythm of the English poetic tradition actually is things that are 666 AQ. So I said, this is like, this is my hypothesis here. And like what Milton, our great epic poet, like I'm assuming like a disproportionate number of his lines will actually be 666. Within 2 minutes, someone's back saying, do you know the very first line of Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit, is 666 AQ. Now, I build my cathedral on this ground. Like that's like for me, this is the fundamental thing. What do you make of that? That's like for me everything. Okay, and it's like if I'm talking about inspiration, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go back into the Bible, and I'm going to say, surely, the lofty powers are going to take biblical scripture seriously as they take Miltonic epic poetry. And And so we get, for instance, in the KGB, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, 666. Or I'm worried that I'm gonna slightly misquote it. It's Genesis 3, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. 777. And I look at these other translations, and they don't do that. I mean, they're just like, I have, therefore, I mean, I'm in theory open to persuasion. Someone could like try and find the Kabbalistic riches of these other English translations of the Bible and persuade me that, you know, I'm wrong and that actually the KJV isn't it. But to me, overwhelmingly, it looks like that there is just endorsement by higher powers of this particular English text that goes, you know, this stuff obviously wasn't deliberately put in by humans. It's like, it stretches coincidence as far as I'm concerned. It's like, seems to me extremely weird that you would have such beautiful Kabbalistic outcome, you know, just as a matter of chance. So when I say KGV only, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I trust that this English text has been providentially composed. And that, you know, when we're dealing with it, we're not dealing with just human writers, whether they're ancient Hebrews or modern English translators of the Hebrew. We're dealing with something much bigger than that.
Now, the idea that English itself is working at the pulse of the beast. That's quite a claim, or a sort of hunch that you're working with. And I kind of want to dig a little deeper into that. So in particular, wouldn't that then make some sort of a case from a sort of Eastern Orthodox position that the translation of the Bible into English is indeed like a sort of satanic innovation, right? And that's even the pulse of capital itself, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, actually, Dave, this is such a good question. And again, it's like, just, I think I want people to really be serious about it. I want to be serious about it. And it's like, if you ask that question, then you say, well, what is Luciferic rebellion? You know, what really is happening there? If you have a deep sense of divine providence, you know, like we've said, Protestantism, atheism, you know, you can't just say about these things they're accidents. You can't just say they're not supposed to happen. You can't just say it would have been better if they didn't happen. You know, they're providential episodes, problematic providential episodes. And we just have to take that all the way back. When you take it all the way back, you obviously are going back to Luciferic revolt. You know, and I think even like Milton, obviously it's the book on this, and it's of course has to be in English, and it has to be illustrated by Gustave Doré and all of these other things, and it has to be that its first line is 666 in alphanumeric Kabbalah. But even Milton, in a certain sense, you know, I think finds it hard to stick to the real issue because, you know, when he's on the fall, when he's on Adam and Eve, I think he gets it, you know, in a deep, what I would say, deep Christianity, that you can't just say this is a mistake. This is what history comes out of, you know. This is history. So you're going to say the whole of history is a mistake? Of course that has to happen. Of course the fall has to happen. You know, it doesn't make any sense to think that that's a problem, or that God's going to be surprised by the fall. Like, oh, I created Adam and Eve and the fuck has messed up. I mean, that's not real, surely. But you have to take it all the way back to Lucifer and say, is that a mistake? You know, is it that God trusted the guy, but he was betrayed? I mean, it would have been better if Lucifer had just not done that, if Lucifer had just remained like unproblematic. And I think this is our question. This is the real question posed by our religious tradition. You know, and there's obviously like two poles that, as to my mind, are completely unsatisfactory. There's a kind of quasi pseudo-orthodox shallow pole that is just, it would have been better if none of this bad stuff had happened. And there's a kind of idiot, gonzo, satanic punk pole, which is that, yay, go Satan. You know, like, I mean, I don't know what more. I'm hoping that is obviously ridiculous, but probably there are people who are still like confused by it.
I can think of a couple people, yeah.
But obviously, it seems to me obvious that those are unsatisfactory. I mean, it's like, no, it's like, you know, it's not only that theologically is the most interesting problem and the most interesting question, but our literature, the Western literary canon, is totally trying to grasp what's going on there. And the whole thing in Faust, I am Mephistopheles, I am that spirit that wants to do ill but only does good. Which is to say, you know, just like we were talking about the invisible hand, in biology, no animal wants to produce a thriving ecosystem. You know, no business wants to produce a thriving, distributed, competitive market economy. Mephistopheles doesn't want to produce whatever it is that Providence wants to produce. You know, we can just accept that. But that doesn't mean that Luciferic experiment was even remotely avoidable, was even in any way not part of what had to happen, what the actual profound religious story of our culture really is about. So that's my long-winded answer to this, I think, excellent question about that. And I think that, yes, the Protestant, the KJV Bible, 1611 Bible, is part of that.
Now we can ask questions about AI. I know Anne's got a question about AI that she wants to ask, and we also wanted to bring in the LA riots and everything going on, especially your takes on immigration. And Anne's got a question about the birth rate and AI. And so, but are we good for time right now? Yeah, because this kind of opens a door here.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're good to keep going, we can kind of, I think maybe this birth rate question could potentially get us into some more just broader talk about culture, which will probably lead into like immigration and the
that would be
LA
good.
riots. Yeah.
Let's go there.
Cool.
Okay.
And so I have been particularly interested in the issue that a lot of, statisticians, researchers are bringing up about the declining birth rate and the repopulation rate. And so just a couple weeks ago, we interviewed Malcolm Collins. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Simone or Malcolm Collins. They're kind of the heads of the pro-natalist movement right now.
Right.
They get called Nazis and right wing every day for because basically they say we need to have more children, and then leftists go, they mean white children. And it's like, no, they actually
Right.
don't mean that at all. But anyways, so I've been reading his book, The Pragmatist's Guide to Crafting Religion. And I just want to like briefly, there's a part in the beginning, and when he talks about crafting religion, what they really mean is cultivars, so kind of these cultures that can reproduce themselves to basically withstand the birth rate decline crisis that they see as inevitable. Now, the
And
one
the corrosive
that
forces of and withstand the corrosive forces of the global urban monoculture, which they see as a mimetic virus that preys on the
Right.
young of every other culture. Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
so they see that there's like they basically make the argument that according to the data and research that they've seen, according to just their experience kind of working with the elites. I mean, Simone had a year-long stint as a managing director at Dialogue, which was a secret society founded by Peter Thiel, with membership limited to the best in-class players from any given field. So basically, like the elites don't have some sort of backup plan for this falling repopulation rate. You know, they talk about how we're already in countries like South Korea, and I'm not sure how this is manifesting, maybe in
Right.
China, where there were
Yeah.
limited child policies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, there's this problem. They say we're just going to see a civilizational collapse unless, then they kind of put this caveat, and I'll just read the paragraph quickly. They say, we no longer believe that it is possible to avert most of the severe economic, governmental, and social consequences associated with a hard landing from population collapse. However, we offer you one caveat. Artificial intelligence may act as a literal deus ex machina. If AI does sweep in to save the day, the nature of society will change dramatically. And so they have a whole part in the appendix kind of going on about their AI apocalypticism and kind of what they think about it. But I'm curious, just in your own research and understanding of the issue, yeah, what role do you see AI playing? You know, are we just doomed as humanity because of this? There's a lot of other reasons that I know you explore as to, you know, the collapse of humanity, but I think this birth rate, declining birth rate one is a particularly interesting and compelling argument to me. So yeah, what do you make of all of that and AI?
Well, let me just say first, I think this is like such an interesting topic.
Mhm.
And I mean, my position on it is much more full of questions than answers at the moment. I mean, like, again, I could go into bullet point mode. I maybe should resist. Maybe should resist that. But like, one thing is this: that on the one hand, there's all these AI, Skynet, anthropocidal apocalypse scenarios, and you know, again, like whatever you say about those, they're interesting and they're culturally extremely influential to a degree that's quite astounding sometimes. Again, like I think this AI 2027 is an extremely interesting text. I don't know whether you guys have seen it yet.
No,
but their
no.
basic position is like as soon as it takes off, as soon as it hits recursive explosion, we're dead. You know, they've just gone to this thing where it's like AI just means human extinction. In a way, I just think, hang on a second. Like, I mean, really? Like, you're seriously saying we can't have anything intelligent on this planet without becoming extinct? And it really seems like that is how they've persuaded themselves that that's how it goes. So anyway, we all know that there's a ton of that stuff. And then on the other side, there's this natality crisis and the collapsing birth rates. And as you say, like where I am now, like in East Asia, it's like they're people that I really care about a lot, you know, these population, and they're all just totally collapsing in a way that's unbelievable. I mean, I like Koreans, you know, I think the world is a better place for having Koreans in it. It's not going to have Koreans in it for long on
Mm,
current projection.
yeah.
So, you know, those two narratives, how do you articulate that?
Hmm.
I mean, on one of them, it's just like, oh, AI doesn't have to kill us because we're just voluntarily extinguishing ourselves. I mean, that's one like why do you even care about AI Skynet? Just Skynet doesn't have to nuke anybody. It doesn't have to nuke Soul. I mean, Soul is just deciding that we're all going to die,
Hmm.
quite irrespective of that. So I don't know how that goes together, and I think people in their minds are not really tying it together. I
Hmm.
mean, people have a natality story and they have an AI story. I don't think they have a integrated
Right, yeah.
AI natality story at all. Um, and then, yeah, the notion that it's going to save us from that, I don't know. There's a huge, interesting thing because, like, if you say, well, let's try not to be just doomerist about AI for the sake of it, and just think about what kind of relation could something much smarter than us have to us. I mean,
Hmm.
one of them is like humans to zoo animals with a kind of you know a positive sense of zoo animals. There is advanced, enlightened zoos. They care about the animals. They
Hmm.
want them to exist. If the animals don't breed, they don't like that. They
Hmm.
want them to be happy. They feed them. They don't want them to die. They, you know, so I mean, on that line, then you can see there's a whole set of scenarios in which AI actually kind of like we're the pandas, you know,
Yeah.
and AI like gets us to breed. Like, um, pandas seem to be just like our idol of the human race, doesn't it? Like they just like they want to die. Like why don't they breed? Like um
Mm.
and we just like round them up. We think they're
Dang.
kind of cute. We force them to reproduce. We force them to survive. We force them to have a genetic future that they themselves seem completely disinclined to have. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm full of questions about this whole zone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing that Dave and I were just talking about this morning, I think, of having questions about it. And well, Dave was, problematizing, well, this is just according to projections. What if the projections are wrong? And, Simone and Malcolm would say, well, even if there was, a baby post-COVID kind of baby boom for a year, well, that's not gonna replace at the rate that we would need to see to. So yeah, it is an interesting issue, and I think maybe this can kind of lead into talking about culture and some leftist culture. I think on the one hand, we're just seeing in our own lives, like we're just experiencing this. So many people kind of between the ages of like 20 and 40, kind of these millennial, late Gen Z type of people. They're called dinks, like a dual income, no kid type of
Yeah,
attitude, where not only do they not want kids, it's just not on their horizon for a variety of reasons, whether it's the environmental impacts. So they think the world is such a terrible place. They don't want the burden of children. It's too costly for kids. Like, whatever their reasons are, not only are they not planning on having kids, I mean, I have a dear friend who is just a few years older than me. She got her tubes cut out before the age of 30. So they're foreclosing that. But then there's also like just this rising, like, hatred of children. And so I find that really culturally interesting. Just not wanting to be around their friends' kids, wanting to go to adult only things, and then participating in these just like total consumer lifestyles.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then there's also, I think, that same kind of group, and I think the people who fall within that same ideology are also very pro-immigration. And I don't think they make that connection. Well, oh, not a lot of people are having kids. Well, let's just have more immigration into our country. But that's the problem that the Malcolms see, or it's not the Malcolm, the Collinses see, is these countries saying, oh, well, we can just replace with immigration. And they say,
Yeah.
that's a bad look to say, hey, let's bring in a bunch of Africans to help our dying white population. Like, that's not a very good look, historically speaking. And so, yeah, I guess, like, what do you make of the kind of the culture and the immigration lens to all of this?
Well, I think the word that often comes up because it's in America's founding documents is our posterity. So I think that when people lose that, weird stuff happens. You know, if you yourself are deliberately heading into genetic extinction, then why do you care who is going to be next? You know, I mean, you've just said you're just quitting. You're just leaving the table. I mean, so I think that's definitely happened. That's become a forbidden thought. Like, to think that our posterity is something that we care about is something that nice people are not supposed to consider.
Right.
But in some ways, I think events are overtaking all of this because, you know, the point is everyone's like I haven't heard this kind of the podcast you're talking about with this thing, but the pro-natalist people are right that it's just sweeping the planet and it's happening much faster than everyone thinks. You know, and it's not just East Asians and the Europeans, it's like, you know, all the world is just falling off a cliff like this. And like maybe Africans are still having kids now, but their trend line is the same. And if they're urbanized and they're brought into the same kind of metro culture that everyone else is, I mean, it's basically now, if you have kids, it's incompetent. Like, you know, that's Africans are having kids out of incompetence. You know, they don't have contraceptives, or they don't, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not like, oh, they still have a healthy pro-natalistic culture and they care about their posterity. It's just they've not got onto the trend line yet. And the trend line is like this thing like, we don't care about the future. And this is why it crisscrosses back to this AI apocalypticism debate. It's like people are just checking out the future. Like, is it at some level they just think it's not the future is not ours anyway? Like, who cares if you just give it to like people of some different ancestry for one generation and it's all robots after that anyway? So like, what's the big deal there?
Well, I guess.
So yeah, it's confused. There's a lot of things swirling around in this.
Yeah.
Here's a reminder to subscribe at Theory Underground at theoryunderground.com/subscribe to access a ton of past courses and seminars, as well as ongoing courses and seminars. And of course, there's a bunch of courses I can't tell you about just yet, but I will tell you the second half of Levinas's Totality Infinity is coming this winter. And there's really nothing better for thinking about Martin Heidegger or Karl Marx than spending some time with Emmanuel Levinas, at least the way I teach it. And if you become a subscriber, you also get access to the course I taught on Being in Time, as well as a bunch of other really cool stuff. Just look at the list and we'll get right back to it. Thank you. Since you haven't listened to Based Camp with Malcolm and Simone Collins, I'll mention a couple things about them because they're a cute, very interesting couple, and they've got a bunch of these great books. And when I say great books, what I'm basically saying is it's all very novel. Like, it's very generative. It's like you can't read very much or listen to very much without having a lot of ideas you probably haven't had. And so it's like, that's the way that I endorse them for everybody, is just like, it's kind of an ideological grenade. It's just going to blow your mind and probably frustrate you, or not you, Nick, but just generally the listener. But also it'll provoke in a good way, I think. And one of the episodes they did recently was Hillary Clinton going mask off with great replacement theory or whatever. And they're saying, well, okay, she's not straight up saying let's replace white people or Westerners or what have you, but she does say in an interview very recently, this is just a few weeks ago, that it's so messed up that JD Vance is proposing that there's like a trophy to moms with children over, with more than 6 children, and then she says something along the lines of, well, if they liked children so much, then wouldn't they like immigrants, since it's the immigrants who are having the babies, it's not the natives. And so it's like, that's an admission. It's like a slip of the tongue almost, right?
Yeah.
And so they make a lot out of that. But you referred to the crisis as a natality crisis, which is also really cool, because we've been talking a lot at Theory Underground about nature, nurture, and natality. We call it the 3 N's or N cubed. And this comes out of the research that I've been doing with Anne over the last few years of our seminar. And we're currently working on a volume of our seminar that will be released, and it culminates in the nature, nurture, natality theme as like, these are 3 things that do not get taken seriously enough by a lot of what we could call postmodern theorists. And of course, I do love postmodern theorists. But as far as how they get taken up by Americans, right? They're just like, oh, it's all words, it's all language games. And what we're kind of getting at, and you can add anything you like to this before we move into it, but basically nature, nurture, and natality are these 3 things that get repressed and left unthought or untaken seriously by the theory, especially coming from the left. Right? As soon as you start talking about the nature of things, we're thinking, oh, well, that's this sort of substance ontology. It's essences. You're trying to make some claim to natural law and natural right, and you're trying to subjugate people. Nurture, I don't think anybody really just talks about at all. But the point is that the way that nurture goes with nature and natality, if I'm to really oversimplify it, is just to say, natality, as opposed to Heideggerian being unto death, it's Arendt's way of thinking about being unto birth, and about how every birth is an opportunity for a sort of fresh start, in a sort of sense. It's a rupture with what's come before. It's you take yourself and you have all of your negative patterns that you haven't been able to overcome. Well, then you have a child that is you, but it's also not you. And now it's a new set of problems, and it's probably going to, in a lot of ways, overcome some of your worst aspects, but of course it'll have new problems. And so this is, natality. It's the opportunity for something new. And nurture, though, has to do with, usually I think the left as social constructivists will just think of everything as constructed. And nurture, I think, is a much more harmonious approach, where it says we don't necessarily understand the mysteries of nature. There's a wisdom in nature. We can't counter it 100%. We got to work with it to some extent, and it's a mysterious process doing that. And so, as far as this AI apocalypse goes, I mean, if we are sort of the shepherds of being in a sort of Heideggerian sense, well, then what's AI's role? And I think, and part of it is that we are the if we were to think the God in flesh, you know what I mean? We are the ones here in flesh, mediating between earth and heaven in a sort of sense. Like there's a sort of noble, deep possibility here for us as mediators between nature and what's going to come out of it or go beyond it in the form of AI. And so I guess natality, we're the beings who are the products of natality, and we are the condition of natality, and then we nurture nature. So like it's not this nature versus nurture thing. So that's my best attempt to sort of give a really quick, glimpse into kind of where we're coming from with this. And is there anything you would want to add to that? Or I don't even know how to turn this into a question for you, Nick, but I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, no, I'm interested. Like, exactly, if you were going to turn that into a question or into how would you do that? Like, obviously, I respect the frame there. I think it's all super interesting. I mean, and I think it's a crisis in a really interesting way for people, all of this stuff. And I think that people are, there's a sense where people have this sense of like, if I go there, the ideological payoff is this, and if I go here, the ideological payoff is this. And it's like, they're scared to think these things through because it's like, where will it lead? And it's much, there's this sense, I think, there's a very rapidly dying framework of accepted, approved positions on these things that require increasing that people don't actually think about them. Like if they do think about them, they're gonna like leave the reservation, and the reservation is on fire. So actually people are going to start thinking about this stuff more, or at least be more open to thinking about it. But right now, it's like all of these words are so charged with their ideological potential. Like if you start thinking about nature, if you start thinking about natality, you very rapidly will be in some dangerous, problematic conceptual zone. And so it's really not safe to do that.
Yeah. And I kind of think that's telling, you know what I mean? It's almost like, is there anything more clown world than the fact that talking about nature, nurture, natality are considered dog whistles, or are considered that is now edgy, right?
Yeah, no, I especially respect the fact you've put nurture on there. I think this is a really good move. Like, is to say, look, are you telling us that we can't think about nature or nurture? I mean, which is the situation? I mean, it's like, it's not like, oh, we're not allowed to talk about nature, we only can talk about nurture. No, we can't talk about nature or nurture because, either could go wrong in some way that we're just not willing to accept.
Well, I guess, so this maybe sets the basis for being able to ask you the question, the Amish question, okay? So for a lot of people who are super into AI, a lot of people in the tech right, as well as various socialists I've talked to, so left and right, they'll see the Amish as this kind of just out of touch thing or something. They're like, oh, those people, because I've brought up in various contexts the idea that there is no path forward for large scale structural change with humans involved if it cannot preserve the kind of local, particular plurality that would keep Amish people in the picture without just kind of being like, haha, those people, right? And what I'm kind of getting at is like, yeah, we want to have Star Trek or something, we want to be able to get off planet and explore the universe. But that's not going to be possible when the progressive mindset has taken one of the most primordial tendencies of the human and demonized it or scapegoated it, right? If that is sort of set up at the beginning, this sort of duopolistic split between tradition and progress, then there cannot be progress. And so that's why I've said in the past that there can only be progress at the speed of right. a play off the speed of light, right? But the point is like,
sure.
Right. And so it's almost like you can't have universalist solutions without particularist possibilities being raised to the level of the priority.
I mean, look, something hugely interesting about the Amish is the fact they're doing fine. You know what I mean? Like, I think everyone could take a step back and say, maybe there's some pretty decent stuff going on in our tradition. That maybe there's some bedrock there that actually is worth hanging on to. That these people who actually don't want to engage in any technological innovation beyond the 18th century are actually doing fine. And they've basically just like opted out of all of this progressive, conservative, high-pitched dialectic, whatever bullshit, and just like they're building their barns and they're doing their agricultural stuff and they're getting married and having kids and they're still there and their population's actually growing. And like, that is actually, if people are going to say to me, do you think we still have even a civilization? I'd say, sure, like, look what's happening to the Amish. There's something, the fact that this is happening is a sign that there's something here that is like good, that this is a possibility, that so yeah, I think they're a really good example. And it's like, it's not my thing. I'm not going to become Amish, and I'm not going to live in an Amish community. And, driving around on those buggies on a country road, some rural thing, it's not something I'm aiming for in life. And I'm more an Elon Musk guy, and I want to see massive rockets hurled into the outer solar system. But, as long as the Amish are there, I feel better about what's going on, for sure. Like, you want exit options. I mean, it's more things people can try and succeed doing and survive doing, for sure, the better. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers your Amish question, but I'm going to be an pro Amish, yeah, for sure. Like, as long as it's not compulsory, not mandatory, I'm fully on it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Nice.
I was thinking about trying to interview an Amish person on the channel, and of course you couldn't do that, but I was thinking what we could do is write them a letter saying, we'd like to read your letter on the channel, and then we could read the whole letter exchange on the channel. Would you be okay with that?
There you go.
Yeah. It's a super interesting question, because why would they care? You know what I mean? Are they gonna? Our whole thing is we what we care about is repairing our barn. You think we care about persuading your audience about the merits of about our lifestyle? I mean, but it's worth a try, 100%. Yeah,
I've just got to try to find the Amish philosopher who's into Heidegger and the question concerning technology. That would be the end point, I think.
I know, why that moment? It's like why that moment? It's just technological paralysis is totally fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the last big question for me, though, and as we wrap up, you'll obviously get to ask something. But what we're doing here on the farm, we're trying to move into this soul-soil system approach that is using philosophy and regenerative agriculture. We're trying to bridge the local and the universal in some post-left, neither right nor left approach. We're grokking it out. We have no real idea of what that looks like, and we don't want to over-determine it, obviously. And so, because nothing goes according to plan anyway. And so, there's a couple hunches that we've got.
Like a human plan.
There's no human plans involved here. No.
Right.
The concept of a plan, maybe. But with nature, nurture, natality, the other thing is, T cubed, the 3 T's, time, energy, talent, and tutelage. And the way to say that is that, you need time energy to discover and cultivate or nurture talent under tutelage, and that this is something anybody needs who's going to get that proper AOE kind of basis in the canon, right? And so, that's something that I also did not get. It's something Anne, even though I was homeschooled by parents who were just kind of figuring it out themselves, so they definitely weren't tapped into something that could have given me that basis. Anne comes out of a much more progressive school approach, and she was an advanced student,
gifted and talented, and then international baccalaureate diploma recipient. But even then, I didn't read any sort of canonical great works of philosophy or literature. It was just like basic high school, but more homework.
Right.
And tests.
And so on the time energy talent tutelage approach, I guess I'm wondering, I think you're a parent, right? You've got children.
Yeah.
And this is maybe, I get it. I understand this is probably a naive or maybe even a stupid question, but I am wondering, now that you have this respect for that AOE approach, I am curious, what we, or more generally American parents in our position, should be doing as far as education is concerned, because the whole situation's so far gone with the schools, but at the same time,
no, that's a good, interesting question, but I honestly don't know what to say. I mean, look, if I just being biographical about it, both our kids ended up homeschooling. It was partly they were catalyzed into that by the whole COVID thing, so they did a whole bunch of like foreign schools, and then homeschooling worked awesomely for both of them. They went to different ones. They got totally different personalities, whatever. They're both very disciplined, and I think if kids don't have self-discipline, they might find that hard. But that worked incredibly well for them. But like Anne said, but neither of them read Greek. I mean, like, that seems like gone, I don't know where people pick that up. I'm assuming anyone who wants to have that level of classical education, it's like they discover quite late in their life that they need that, and then they have to somehow put it together. And it's like, that's just the way it is. So, I mean, I honestly don't know what to say, except I do think that these the whole homeschool infrastructure, and by that I just mean online education, is really improving well, and is super impressive already, and is incredibly competitive with public education already. And my wife in particular is very worried about this, and maybe they wouldn't meet people and make friends and all that kind of stuff. But I think everyone in the family agrees it was just such a good decision. So that's just my absolutely anecdotal level thing. But
and you say they went to different ones?
Sorry, what?
You said they were homeschooled, but they went to different ones.
Like
it's all
programs.
This online thing. Like, we're living in Shanghai, so yeah, my son went to a kind of English style A levels whatever thing, and my daughter went to a Canadian based online homeschooling thing, and they both were just so much happier, so much more productive. It all worked massively better than their like formal education had worked before. But it does require incredible self-discipline. Like, if your kids aren't actually interested, then it's not probably going to be easy. But sorry, I'm just going to try and, because I don't think it's anecdotal level is very helpful for people. It's just to say the general thing is this is going to explode for sure. This is going to be huge. We haven't seen anything yet about this, and my sense of public education worldwide is that it's really not doing well, and it's falling to bits, and people are realizing that. And in terms of things that are going to be replaced by AI-based things, I mean, it will include people probably and whatever, but it's like basically revolutions, the AI revolution. This is first in the line because it's completely dysfunctional, and the only reason anyone has for doing it is they'll meet people at school.
Right.
You know, it's like they'll make friends.
Right.
Or, you know, obviously, yeah, it's kind of child management or whatever, you know, like you're both working and like it's like
babysitting
school. So
yeah,
babysitting. Yeah,
and
yeah,
Anne and I were both just teaching at a state university here in Idaho, at Boise State University, and our our experience did not leave us with a very great taste in our mouth about it. And it is just a very expensive way to make friendships. And I would probably say in most cases ones that will not actually last. But it's justified as though it is like an important social experience. I started referring to it as the liberal Rumspringa, right? Like this is the liberal analog to the Amish Rumspringa. And it's like, okay, so, you know, we used to be very pro-free college, you know, but now what does that actually mean? It means bailing out one of the worst failing industries so that people can make some friends. Like couldn't you do that anyway?
Yeah.
Make some friends, drink, and cheat on your homework that's being given to you by underpaid, overworked adjuncts who are like barely contract employee. It's just like, yeah, it's not, both the students coming in are just like literally not prepared for that level of education, and the level has gone down so much, just the standards and the quality and the expectations. But then the institution itself is not getting those students up to a higher level. And then you throw AI into the mix, which can be useful, but students are mostly just using it to plug in the essay prompt and then turn in like regurgitated robotic garbage. That's very easy to tell that it's AI.
Well, that's...
No, I mean, that's itself a huge, interesting question. Because, of course, that's completely unstoppable. It's completely unstoppable. And so that generation is just going to be... You've got your AI buddy who can just tell you what would be a good essay on this subject. Like, there's some mechanism that can stop them using it. I mean, give me a break. Of course. You know, so they're in that world already. And it's like... The notion that these institutions are going to kind of carry on business as usual, and business as usual is total collapse, actually. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, as usual, my prediction is apocalypse. Exactly, the modality of that is interesting to predict, but yeah, it's not carrying on. And of course, education is going to get it first.
Right.
I mean, it's like that's... Of course it's going to get it first. So AI is going to sweep into AI. What the hell do you think AI even is if you don't think it's going to completely turn this whole sector on its head? Yeah. So, yeah.
So, I mean, it's good, though, in a sort of sense that it's gutting the cathedral, which had already become a sort of just this instrument of reproduction for a certain outmoded set of social relations, right? Now, the assumption we're running with here is that, you know, children are not just born with a natural inclination towards discipline. Of course, it may, in some cases, obviously, but generally speaking, kids are going to get most of what they get from those first few years with their parents. And so, you know, that's one of the things that's admirable about the J.D. Vance sort of influence with MAGA is that, like, families matter. Let's take that a lot more seriously. And I think that's one of the ways that you could have common cause across pretty much any political or religious divide, is just to be like, look, we believe that parents need to be reading books with their children. Whether or not you think drag queens should be reading books with children, we can all agree parents should be reading with their children, and that's the only way. And that means that for someone like us, like now that we're older and we wish we had learned Greek at an early age, well, guess what? We can learn it still if we just spend that time with our children, right?
Yeah. I think that's an awesomely great point to make.
Yeah.
I think that's an awesomely great point to make. I mean, I think, if you try to raise your kids with the education you missed, you're doing something truly great. That's for sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's so complicated. I mean, it's like, like just on this self-discipline thing, like where the hell does that come from? I mean, like it's genes, it's nurture, it's like, it's, no one knows. It's a complicated thing, isn't it? And it just comes to you as like, I mean, speaking personally, like just fate, fortune, like, I'm not at all inclined to preach about how people should treat their kids. I feel I've just been absolutely blessed in this way. I mean, so yeah, I don't know how you do that. I mean, if you were going to say like, my kid is naturally completely like self-discipline, is this something I don't know. Fortunately, thank the Lord, that is not a problem I've had to face, like, I don't know.
Do you let them? Did you let them go on phones at a young age? Did they have tablets?
Basically police us. We've been like, we've been total liberals, and our kids have been like, but they've rebelled. They've rebelled against our libertarianism by being like hyper responsible, conservative, like.
So they're not like they're not like
this is a one generation payoff thing.
So they're not like the iPad generation, super ADHD then.
Yeah, no, but we literally not had that. Personally.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, look, I'm sort of almost a bit nervous about being this. Like, I hope my family's not like, where the hell were you talking about us on this podcast? Like,
oh no!
So it's not something I've done. And I probably shouldn't make a habit of that.
No. And we don't want to make a habit out of getting you there. And I did want to quick segue it into libertarianism and the AOE. I know we got to close out, but you've got a message you need to share with libertarians out there. Elon Musk has this libertarian streak. He's taken the Doge thing too literal. Maybe it's autism, maybe it's psychosis, but this libertarian idea, taken too far, I think, is kind of what I wanted to bring. Because if you're sympathetic to the AOE, right? Well, the reason you were, and let's see if I can get this right, but you were a lot more down with the neo-Lemurian time sorcery, because it's capital and it's deterritorialization, and if the AOE is more about territorialization, well, you're still for capitalism. So what does it mean that you're for capitalism but you're anti-immigration, when immigration is such an important part of capitalism? And you have like the Cato Institute and the Koch brothers, and they're pro-immigration as well, and it's because they're capitalist, right? And so if you're capitalist, why are you not more for this kind of deterritorializing force of capital? And when did this change in you occur? Like, is there a theory reason for this change? And what would you tell those libertarians?
What would I tell those libertarians? Well, I think that there's a big shift going on, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. And like, I've got libertarian mutes on X, and I probably select them in a rightward direction, and they are also in this thing that it's like, let's forget libertarianism, liberalism what does it take to preserve a liberal society? And I mean, the catastrophic error of the kind of, of mainstream libertarianism and the leftist versions of that is that, anything goes, the whole world can become a libertarian theme park. I mean, that's absolutely not true. I mean, there are kind of cultural foundations of a liberal society that are quite fragile. They're quite rare. They require very distinct characteristics. And they simply are not globalizable in any realistic fashion. If you globalize them, you totally lose them. It's just to say, like, our culture means nothing, our tradition means nothing. Liberalism, in the most facile libertarian thing, libertarianism is like just something in the air. It's like you read Milton Friedman, you read Mises, and you just become a libertarian, and that could just happen anywhere. And that seems to me obviously preposterously, stupidly wrong. Liberal societies have come out of very distinctive traditions, and they are surprisingly fragile. And I'm in my circle, I think, sort of stereotypically liberal, in the sense that I'm very into a certain amount of ethnic sort of complexity and all of these things. I love model minorities. I love Chinatowns. I love all of this kind of stuff. But to go from there to this just open borders, third world, pour in, and we're still going to have a liberal society? I mean, forget what I think. I don't think anyone believes that anymore. And people don't even believe that. Even the ethnic minorities I'm very sympathetic to and like a lot are also in the crosshairs. Like, the obvious example of this is Indians after this whole H-1B thing. I mean, the amount of anti-Indian shit that I've seen, anti-Hindu Indian, it's just huge. I mean, I like Indians. Like, I mean, I don't have any of this animus, but I totally understand that because what's happened is just this notion that you can just completely obliterate your ethnic foundations, and you can still have the kind of society that is based on those ethnic foundations. That's just bullshit. That's obviously total bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't think I really have to make a big argument for that, because I think everyone thinks that now. That is the big sea change that is happening in Europe, in America. It's like, our culture doesn't come out of the void. Culture comes out of like actual lineages, out of people, out of a tradition. And if you screw over those things, then you don't have that anymore.
I think a testament to that fact is that Anne was an international baccalaureate, which is, for people unaware of what that really means in the U.S., I didn't know before. Is basically, it's more advanced than AP sections of, say, science or what have you. AP being advanced. Well, the international baccalaureate's even beyond that, and so it's been revealing to me through our conversations. She read a sum total of 0 biographies or autobiographies in her entire K through 12 education, as well as her entire bachelor's, at the university. No autobiographies, no biographies. Not even like,
no like primary texts of sociology when I was a sociology student.
Yeah. no
Yeah.
primary texts at all, really. That's what we're getting at. And so, of course, none of the canon. No Republic, no KJV, no Iliad, no, maybe a little Shakespeare. Yeah.
Some Shakespeare.
Okay.
I read some
Yeah.
other Greek play.
One
but
play
yeah.
they do, like all these things. So it's like you do a Shakespeare play.
Right.
Mhm.
And so the idea, this is what you're getting at with ethnicity and culture, is the idea of like, no, but like when we're talking progeny and we're talking about posterity, when we're talking, it's true. If you read Benjamin Franklin, if you read John Adams, if you read Jefferson, like they're all talking about not only posterity, but I've also come to this realization that, I mean, really this blew my mind when I started thinking about it. It was almost like, because I've been thinking about the collapse of the private and the public ever since reading The Human Condition by Hannah Arendt, where she talks about socialization undermining the integrity of this distinction that was established in Greece. Well, what was the private, though, for the Founding Fathers? The private, let's say letter exchanges with one's spouse. The private, let's say a private letter exchange with a rival. These were addressed to posterity. So like these were not private in the sense of like it's secrets that will die with you. These were private in the sense that, well, this isn't going to be in the newspaper tomorrow or while we're breathing, but this will be for the record for our descendants to judge. And there's a fun little anecdote that gets at this because both Benjamin Franklin and John Adams shared a bedroom when they were staying in Paris. I don't know if you've heard this story, but they had an argument about whether the window should be up or down, right? One of them wants the cool air in, one wants to be warmer. Anne and I have this problem all the time, of course. And so, they have an argument about it, and both of them tell posterity that they won the argument in their diary.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is ultimately what we're getting at when we think about culture, and it's kind of crazy to me that the people who want to act like it doesn't exist or it doesn't have to be carefully maintained will be the people who say, oh, well, the Lakota Native American people, they have this rule about thinking 7 generations forward. And it's like, yeah, actually, so did the Founding Fathers. What are you talking about? So did the Hebrews. What are we talking about? So,
yeah. I mean, it's complicated by the fact that Anglos are so weird. Because Anglos are very inviting of other cultures. It's just what they are. I mean, they go to India, they become Hindus, they start, they become Vedic mystics, they marry Indian women. I mean, it's like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think a lot of the people I talk to now just think that's just a terrible thing. Anglos just deserve to die because they do this, and they do this. I mean, I'm on this thing like I have to fall back on providential history. Like the lofty powers will forgive us for this. We're doing something that's good, but you don't go from that to just saying culture is nothing. Extinguish it. It's like the very notion of having a culture is wrong. It's racist to even think you've got a culture. This absolutely crazy extrapolation of these Anglo impulses to complete ethnic racial suicide as some kind of moral imperative is a horrible thing that is coming to an end. I mean, it is coming to an end, and it could go. It could. There's horrible things in the other direction that could happen. So it's not like I'm just sanguine about, oh, great, But for sure, this particular insane path that we were on, our people were on, is going to stop, and it's going to stop before its own. It has its own just lunatic utopian models that like we're going to just like interbreed everybody until like there's just not any ethnicity or racial identity left Yeah, I mean, no, sorry, guys. That just like you're on the wrong time scale. That's not going to happen. You know, this thing is coming to a climax, pretty or ugly, whatever it may be, way before that. So just step back from the utopian fucking theorizing and just think, what is a realistic thing you can hope for? And I mean, I think I'm a bit like, notorious for having said that for having criticized what I think is going to be an overreaction. Like a lot of this, like there's a lot of like an Anglo or worse, because I think more meaningless, white ethnic resistance or like pushback or whatever. That's gonna, I think, get just way over the top. And it's gonna lose a lot of really good stuff. I mean, there is a level of multiculturalism that's just really awesome, and it's like, I mean, I, as a kind of right-wing liberal, I love roof Koreans, I love Chinatowns. There's a whole bunch of this stuff I think is just great, and it's what makes me proud to come from that tradition. And I'm worried that that's going to come under a lot of pressure. But things went so insane in the other direction that it's really takes a lot of optimism now to think they're not going to swing back too far the other way.
Right. And so maybe, to close out, we started with kind of a current event, Trump and Musk, and so we can kind of end on the really current event, which are these LA immigration riots. And like once again, we're seeing just chaotic, crazy protests, very reminiscent of BLM and lots of other kind of leftist activist, anarchist activist behaviors that like I one just haven't quite been following that much, so I don't entirely know the facts of okay, National Guard, what's Trump's response, what's going on with the governor, but I'm just curious, yeah, how these people are thinking that this is a good move for their kind of pro-immigration, pro-multicultural stance when we're getting images of masked people destroying police cars holding a Mexican flag in California. Like,
Yeah,
that's not a good look.
yeah.
And so I just truly wonder, like, what is to come of this for these activists? What is the Trump administration, like this surely is not going to help the Democrats. Like they just are like, ah, yes, and they're just, I think, getting lower and lower in public opinion.
Cory
So
Booker's
yeah,
over here just repeatedly saying that that these are peaceful protests. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess what do you make of that in relation to all of this and kind of what's gonna come from this? Will this help Trump? Is Trump's response too severe? Because I think it also is like scary to see, oh, a reporter got shot in the leg with a rubber bullet. Well, should she have been in the
Yeah.
way? Probably not. But still, that's not a good precedent to be setting that we're now shooting at reporters in the street. So it's just all chaos coming from both sides. And I'm curious what you make of all of it.
I mean, obviously, my prediction is like, as far as I'm concerned, overreaction. I think the left has been so completely insane that all the good stuff in their program is being just burnt on the altar of just what people say virtue signaling. It's just like, and I think it ties up with your anti-natalist thing. I just don't think they give a shit. I mean, like they'd given, if you cared about the future, you'd have kids. If you don't, like, you just think, fuck it, some gestural bullshit on social media is all I care about. And then it's gonna swing crazily. It's gonna overswing the other way. I mean, I'm not going to look further down the line than that. But the point is, there's other trends that are happening so fast that even this level of crazy monkey politics is just going to get swamped by stuff. I mean, well, once we've got like high level artificial intelligences kicking around, like this is all going to look like such a sideshow. This is just like what we were doing as a species just before superintelligence arrived on this planet. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing.
Right.
I mean, we just have to hope they have the kind of let's save the pandas attitude, I think.
All right, well, Nick, it's been a pleasure to have you back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it a lot, guys. So yeah, good luck with this whole thing. So yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great, and I'm sure we'll be back all together again one day in the future.
Yeah.
Always lots to talk about, but this has been really great conversation. It's been nice to
get
to meet you. Yeah,
to talk about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. All
right.
Great.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Recording
Have a great night.
Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Subscribers get access to all past courses at Theory Underground, from Chris Catrone to Michael Downs, as well as ongoing courses taught by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Nina Power. Subscribers also get access to monthly research seminars, and the higher tiers of involvement unlock discussions and one-on-one small group tutelage. So if you're like me and you're never a huge bookish kind of person, but somewhere along the way you got really into listening to educational materials, if you got really into listening to podcasts and then books at work, if you love going deep into ideas, but you're just not a traditional bookish kind of person, well, this is where the alliance between people like us and people who are more bookish and specialized are able to meet, to work through these things, and do so in defense of the human, in defense of our dignity, in defense of our common humanity and our intellectual integrity. This is not a place where we're going to kick you out because you're pro-life or pro-choice, or where you are an atheist or a agnostic or a Christian. But it is a place where you're expected to love one another regardless of such things, and to show up for people in your actual IRL real life communities regardless of such things. And if that is exciting for you, and if you're excited to learn about what this approach, this method, this school of thought has to offer, then I'm excited to meet you. Subscribe today. Thank you.